What shocked those closest to the inner circle wasn't just the presence of Catherine's name. It was the unmistakable emphasis. She wasn't listed as a custodian. She wasn't given a minor note of trust. She was the sole designated heir, not to jewels or land alone, but to a legacy, a vault meant to determine the royal future beyond the living reign. The implications were immediate and staggering. If true, this meant the Queen Mother saw in Catherine something others missed or willfully ignored. A warning embedded in foresight, a shift hidden in plain sight. Even more unsettling were the early reports that the Queen Mother may have suspected betrayal, perhaps not from enemies, but from within the walls of the palace itself. Some now believe the vault was her contingency plan, a final safeguard, meant not for Charles, nor for Camilla, but for the one she trusted most to carry the soul of the monarchy forward. That person was not the current Queen Consort, it was Catherine. But how did Prince Edward gain access, and why would he be the one chosen to reveal what others dared keep hidden? He was always seen as the quiet one, loyal, undemanding, but behind closed doors, Prince Edward has been harboring deep frustrations with the monarchy's direction. His silence was never consent, it was strategy. And now, with the Queen Mother's vault as his weapon, he's finally taking his stand. From the outside, Edward appeared content with his place in the royal structure, never seeking the spotlight, never stirring scandal. But those closest to him knew better. For years, Edward watched in silence as Camilla's presence grew louder, her influence expanding like unchecked vines across Buckingham's most sacred walls. And with every closed-door meeting, every reshuffle of power that tilted the axis toward Camilla, Edward felt the erosion of something deeper: heritage, integrity, and the values the Queen Mother once held sacred. His frustration wasn't fueled by ambition, but by disillusionment. While the world saw a stable royal institution, Edward saw a decaying foundation, and he feared that unless something changed, the monarchy would lose its soul. Behind the scenes, aides noted Edward's quiet alignment with Catherine, someone he saw as the only royal who carried herself with the dignity and restraint reminiscent of the Queen Mother. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were measured and deliberate. "She's more Windsor than most born into it," he once whispered to a trusted advisor. When Camilla was elevated to Queen Consort, Edward didn't object publicly, but those near him described his expression as one of quiet devastation. He knew the tides had shifted, but he wasn't ready to drown in them, not yet. Then came the moment that would change everything: a private letter, not routed through palace mail, hand-delivered, sealed in wax bearing the Queen Mother's personal insignia. Inside, a message written not to a prince but to a guardian: "If you're reading this, then it means the others have failed. What I have hidden is not meant for them. It is meant for the one who still remembers who we are." The words were a summons, and Edward understood immediately. The vault wasn't a myth, it was a mission. His next moves were deliberate. He didn't go to Charles, he didn't even inform Palace Legal Counsel. Instead, he reached out to Princess Anne and Duchess Sophie. The three formed a discreet triangle of trust, bound not by personal gain, but by their shared belief that the Queen Mother's intent had been lost beneath the politics of power. Anne, the ever-pragmatic anchor; Sophie, the quiet soul with a backbone of steel; and Edward, the reluctant heir to a truth that threatened to fracture everything. But nothing weighed heavier than the promise he made at the Queen Mother's bedside. A vow spoken in hushed tones as she clutched his hand and said, "Don't let them rewrite what matters. If they forget, remind them." That promise became his burden, and the vault became his answer. What he found inside would shake his very core, but it also gave him purpose. He was no longer the quiet one. He was the keeper of the Queen Mother's final message. And just as the storm began to brew in Edward's heart, one name kept echoing through every secret he uncovered: Catherine. The document was dated, sealed, and written in the Queen Mother's own hand. No legal jargon, just clarity, conviction, and one name underlined 3 times: Catherine. She wasn't chosen by marriage, but by merit. And now everything was about to change. Tucked within the vault, buried beneath layers of ceremonial trinkets and faded correspondence, it lay inside a velvet pouch marked with a single word: future. It wasn't addressed to the king. It wasn't marked for legal review. It was never meant for the Privy Council or the public record. It was personal, raw, and astonishingly direct. The Queen Mother had left behind a single-page document that made her intentions undeniable. In looping, steady handwriting, she outlined a vision not for the monarchy's figureheads, but for its moral spine, and that spine, she declared, was Catherine. The paper trembled slightly as Edward handed it to Princess Anne, both of them wordless, their eyes fixed on the signature that bore more weight than any royal seal. Elizabeth Angela Marguerite Bowes-Lyon. The language within the document was not cold or ceremonial. It was fierce, intimate, and carved in truth. The Queen Mother spoke of Catherine as a woman of unshakable grace and quiet power, someone who walks the halls with the spirit of duty rather than desire. She called her a sovereign of the heart before the title, a phrase that now echoed like prophecy through the palace's marble corridors. Even more jarring, however, was what wasn't there. No mention of Camilla, not once. No reference to her family, her children, her future. It wasn't an oversight, it was erasure, intentional and complete. The power of the document wasn't just symbolic, it had teeth. Enclosed with it were sealed directives granting unofficial stewardship over certain royal heirlooms, jewelry, estates, and confidential archives that had quietly escaped official inventories. These weren't ceremonial tokens, they were tools of influence. Keys to historic estates, maps of royal tunnels, coded ledgers, and private correspondence between monarchs spanning generations. It was a trove meant not just to preserve a legacy, but to control it. The Queen Mother had bypassed the system and created her own path forward, and she handed it to Catherine. When Catherine was finally brought in alone, shielded from press and palace noise, she was shown the document in the same chamber the Queen Mother once hosted wartime meetings. Witnesses said she went silent for several minutes, her eyes fixed on the underlined signature. Her hands trembled. At first, she refused to believe it. She asked if it was authentic, if perhaps it was planted or misunderstood. But as each layer of the vault's secrets unfolded around her, something shifted. The tears came quietly, grief, shock, and responsibility crashing down all at once. Then came the stillness of someone no longer questioning why, but preparing for what. Catherine understood that this wasn't a blessing, it was a burden. One passed not through law, but through legacy. She wasn't being invited into power, she was being summoned to protect it. And in that moment, the weight of a century-old crown didn't rest on Charles's head. It hovered over hers. But if Catherine was the named heir, what did that make Camilla in the eyes of the Queen Mother, and more importantly, in the eyes of the monarchy now? Camilla's name wasn't missing, it was erased, scrubbed with intent. When she learned of the vault's contents, her fury rattled the palace walls. What followed was not just a private tantrum, it was a declaration of war within the royal family. The air inside Clarence's house turned electric the moment Camilla received word. She hadn't seen the document. She didn't need to. All it took was a whispered confirmation from one of Charles's shaken aides. Catherine's name was written in the Queen Mother's hand, 3 times underlined. Hers was nowhere to be found. Camilla exploded. The sound of raised voices, shattering objects, and slammed doors quickly became the talk of the inner palace staff. One senior attendant, requesting anonymity, later admitted, "It was the loudest she's ever been." And it wasn't grief. It was rage. That rage, however, wasn't directed solely at the past. It was directed at the present, at Edward, at Anne, and eventually at Charles himself. Within hours, Camilla demanded an emergency audience with her husband. What was supposed to be a private conversation became a storm of ultimatums. Sources say she paced furiously, insisting that the Queen Mother's wishes were irrelevant in today's monarchy. She accused Edward of orchestrating a coup in Catherine's favour. Anne, she claimed, had always resented her rise. And Charles, now caught in the eye of the hurricane, was forced to face the impossible. Would he defend the legacy of his mother, or protect the woman who had stood beside him through scandal and restoration? That answer would not come easily, nor would it come without consequence. Behind the palace walls, Camilla's inner circle mobilized. Letters were drafted, old alliances were summoned. Longtime friends of the Queen Consort attempted to smear the document's legitimacy. Whispers began circulating of forgeries, tampered records, and false vault entries. Camilla's team even hinted that the Queen Mother may have written the letter under declining mental faculties, an implication so incendiary it drew audible gasps from senior courtiers. But no matter how loud the spin became, one problem persisted. The Queen Mother's handwriting was confirmed by 3 separate royal archivists. The letter was real, and its silence toward Camilla screamed louder than any royal decree. In moments of desperation, Camilla turned accusatory. She called Edward's actions a betrayal, claiming he had deliberately timed the release of the vault's company, intents to undermine her position as queen. She described Anne's quiet involvement as sabotage cloaked in tradition. But these attacks only further distanced her from the palace's heart. Staff who had once followed her out of obligation began shifting their loyalty. Subtle gestures emerged, Catherine's name spoken with more frequency, her presence greeted with deeper reverence. Camilla, once at the center of the palace's energy, now found herself surrounded by cold walls and colder shoulders. As Charles struggled to maintain composure, and the monarchy wavered between past and present, it became clear that this was no longer about one woman's exclusion. It was about a divided house, a royal family caught between loyalty and legacy. And while Camilla fought to erase the revelation, another force was gathering behind closed doors, one that would finally tip the balance of royal power. She never speaks unless it matters, and when Princess Anne read the vault document, she didn't speak at all. She acted. A royal nod from Anne isn't just approval, it's command, and her silent endorsement of Catherine was a dagger through Camilla's final hopes. The moment Anne was handed the document from the vault, the room reportedly fell into a suffocating silence. Her eyes scanned the Queen Mother's handwriting with icy precision. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. And yet something shifted in the air, the kind of shift that only those trained to sense power could feel. Those in the room held their breath, waiting for the Princess Royal to react. But Anne offered nothing. No approval, no objection, no outrage. Just the faintest of nods as she folded the paper, tucked it back into its sleeve, and walked out. What followed next wasn't noise, it was movement, deliberate, tactical, and utterly unignorable. Palace insiders confirmed that within hours, Anne made a series of quiet, rapid calls, none of them to King Charles. Not one to waste words or energy, she reached out to only 2 people, her brother Edward and her closest aide. The message was simple but unmistakable. The Queen Mother's wishes would be upheld, no matter who stood in the way. Within days, Anne summoned Catherine to her private quarters and did something no one could have predicted. She presented her with a family heirloom, one that hadn't been seen in public in over 40 years. A brooch once worn by the Queen Mother during wartime broadcasts, a symbol of resilience, was now quietly pinned to Catherine's lapel at her next engagement. It was subtle, but the message was thunderous. Anne had chosen her. When questioned by Edward later that week, Anne's reply was as sharp as it was unshakable. Mother would have done the same. Those 6 words dismantled any argument before it could form. There was no room for speculation, no grey area to dance around. Anne was aligning herself with Catherine not out of sentiment, but out of conviction. And if Anne was convinced, others would follow, including the gatekeepers of tradition, including the stewards of protocol, including the very forces Camilla had once relied on to secure her reign. Then came the council briefing. Senior royal advisors, ministers and family members, all present, Camilla among them. It was Anne who chaired that day's session, and her demeanor was icy and efficient. When Camilla attempted to pivot the discussion toward questions about historical clarity regarding the vault, Anne cut her off mid-sentence. "We're not here to rewrite what's already written," she said, eyes fixed, tone unshakable. The recording of that moment, though never released publicly, reportedly sent tremors through the palace staff. Camilla, for the first time, was left speechless. The message was unmistakable. The Queen Mother's word would not be challenged, not on Anne's watch. But perhaps the most revealing moment came quietly during a conversation Anne had with 2 senior palace aides overheard near the chapel gardens, referring to Catherine not as Duchess, nor as Princess, but as the family's future. That phrase was later repeated in internal correspondence, echoed in speeches and whispered in circles where only power listens. Anne had not just accepted Catherine's inheritance, she had ignited it. And while Anne moved with the discipline of a general, another royal was preparing to launch a bold declaration of loyalty in public view. She had always remained in the background, but not anymore. Duchess Sophie stepped forward with a voice so clear, so full of quiet defiance, that even Charles hesitated. Her loyalty was never to a crown but to character, and in her eyes Catherine was the crown's true future. Long before the vault was opened, long before the Queen Mother's final message resurfaced, Sophie had been privy to conversations most others overlooked. In the final months of the Queen Mother's life, Sophie had spent quiet afternoons at her side discussing everything from the fragility of the firm to the growing restlessness within the palace walls. It was during those visits that the Queen Mother, in a rare moment of vulnerability, confided in Sophie about a private vault, one that held not just sentimental heirlooms, but the essence of royal preservation. She didn't reveal details, but she warned Sophie of a time when tradition would collide with ambition. When that day comes, she had whispered, you'll know which voice to follow. When the vault was finally unsealed and its contents revealed, Sophie wasn't shocked, she was vindicated. Everything the Queen Mother had hinted at, every cryptic word, every solemn look, had led to this. And now, the question wasn't what to do with the truth, it was, who had the courage to uphold it. Without hesitation, Sophie stepped into the light. At a royal engagement just days later, with press and protocol watching closely, she made a move that ignited whispers across the kingdom. She embraced Catherine, addressed her first, and bypassed Camilla entirely. What seemed like a simple gesture was anything but. It was a message, a stance, a quiet war cry wrapped in civility. Behind palace doors, the tension escalated quickly. A confrontation between Sophie and Charles was inevitable and brutal. Sources close to the palace described the meeting as the most emotionally charged exchange Charles has had since his mother's death. Sophie did not plead. She did not soften her tone. She laid bare the truth of what the Queen Mother had intended and challenged Charles to face what his title demanded of him, not what his marriage protected. The conversation reportedly ended with Charles in tears and Sophie walking out without a backward glance. For the first time, she was no longer asking for space, she was claiming it. From that moment on, something shifted in her. Palace. Aides began referring to Sophie as unshackled, a woman no longer confined by her role but fueled by a mission. She stopped waiting for permission and began operating with purpose. Meetings, alliances, and subtle shifts in staff behavior began pointing to one truth. Sophie was orchestrating a quiet realignment of the family's moral compass. And at the center of that compass stood Catherine. Sophie wasn't defending her because of politics. She was protecting her because of promise. Because the Queen Mother hadn't chosen Catherine for power, she had chosen her for preservation. And when asked privately if she feared breaking the firm apart by siding so clearly with Catherine, Sophie's answer was devastating in its simplicity. If the truth breaks it, then it was already broken. The weight of that truth, the cost of that loyalty, now rested on Catherine's shoulders. But as allegiances shifted and loyalties hardened, it was Catherine who found herself at the heart of a decision no royal had faced before. She never asked for the spotlight. She never wanted the crown handed this way. But with the Queen Mother's words echoing in her mind and the royal family fracturing before her eyes, Catherine realized this wasn't ambition, it was destiny knocking through the iron doors of a forgotten vault. In the days following the document's discovery, Catherine withdrew. Not out of fear, but from the unbearable weight of the moment. She had never been a woman who chased power. Her strength had always been quiet, grounded in compassion and duty, not title. And now, as the storm around her swelled with Anne taking position, Sophie rising in her defense, and Camilla raging through the corridor, Heiress Catherine stood at a crossroads she never imagined she'd face. Accepting the Queen Mother's blessing meant altering the entire trajectory of the monarchy. It meant stepping into a role that had never been promised but now felt preordained. And for a brief moment she said no. Sources close to her describe a deep internal conflict, nights spent in silence, pages of the Queen Mother's letter reread over and over, and long walks through the palace gardens where staff were told not to disturb her. Then something shifted. A smaller box had been tucked deep within the vault, not labelled, not even mentioned by Edward or Anne. It was Sophie who found it, bearing only Catherine's name on its seal. Inside, a second letter, shorter, fiercer, more intimate. In it, the Queen Mother addressed Catherine not as a member of the firm, but as a woman. You are not chosen because of your title. You are chosen because you already lead, even when no one is watching. That was the moment everything changed. The following morning, Catherine made a quiet, deliberate visit to the Queen Mother's grave. No photographers, no press release, just a solitary act of reverence, and perhaps a final plea for guidance. Those who saw her leave described her as pale, composed, and different. Something had hardened in her gaze, not with bitterness, but with resolve. Later that day, she requested a private audience with King Charles. No aides were permitted. What happened behind that door would never be officially recorded, but whispers from within the palace paint a clear picture. Catherine did not raise her voice. She didn't argue or threaten. Instead, she said one line that stunned the king into silence. "I never wanted this, but I won't let her down." After that, the shift became irreversible. Catherine met with her children in a closed family sitting room. George, Charlotte, and Louis were told the truth not about politics, but about purpose. She explained that they might notice changes, that responsibilities may feel heavier, and that no matter what, they would face the future together. It wasn't a royal declaration. It was a mother preparing her children for a storm that had already begun to roll in. In that moment, Catherine was no longer just the Duchess of Cambridge. She had become the bridge between two monarchies, one rooted in the past, and one daring to step into something far more uncertain. But as Catherine prepared to carry the weight of a legacy she didn't seek, the monarchy's oldest defender stepped from the shadows to ensure the past would not be erased. Just when the royal family thought the worst had been revealed, Prince Edward played one final card, a dusty reel buried in the vault. It was the Queen Mother's voice, and what she said shattered every last doubt, igniting a firestorm no one saw coming. The vault, already a trove of emotional wreckage and irreversible truths, still held one final secret, a false panel, hidden behind a collection of archived letters and trinkets no one had dared touch for decades. It was Anne who noticed the seam, but it was Edward who pried it open. Inside lay a small box containing several labelled reels, each wrapped in cloth, dated in the Queen Mother's hand. One bore a single word: future. The weight of that recording didn't lie in what it might contain, but in what it would force them all to confront. Edward, with trembling hands and a heart laced with dread, took the reel and locked it in his study. No one else knew yet. He waited for the right moment, and when it came, he summoned Anne, Sophie, and William. No aides, no staff, just them, the reel, and a vintage recorder brought from the royal archives. The sound of static gave way to a voice calm, sharp, unmistakably her. The Queen Mother's tone wasn't warm, it wasn't sentimental, it was calculated, direct, and layered with years of foresight. "If this is being heard, then those I trusted have failed to protect the crown from its drift," she began. "Modern politics will seduce the monarchy into compromise. But one woman stands against the current. Not by blood, but by truth she shall inherit all." Gasps were stifled as the message continued. The Queen Mother didn't name Catherine outright, but the clues were unmistakable references to her unshakable dignity, her quiet strength, and her ability to withstand the storm without bending to it. Her praise was exact, unmistakable. And then came the blow that changed everything. There are those who will claw at the throne in the name of reform, not honor. Their legacy is noise. Hers is silence with purpose. It wasn't a direct attack on Camilla, but it didn't have to be. The Queen Mother's condemnation was sharpened with enough precision to leave no doubt whom she was speaking of. The impact of the recording was seismic. Anne sat stone-faced, fists clenched. Sophie wept. William, for the first time, said nothing. Edward stood, silent but resolute, and posed a question that would echo in the walls of Windsor forever. Do we hide her voice or follow it? It didn't take long for them to agree. The recording must be preserved, but its release would detonate the monarchy if leaked carelessly. Still, someone knew. A palace aide, inadvertently present outside the room, caught the tail end of the Queen Mother's voice. By morning, the rumours began to swirl. Journalists sniffed at the scent of scandal. Reporters whispered about an audio file that could destroy Camilla's standing in seconds. The recording was secured, but the palace knew it was only a matter of time. One leak, one whisper, one betrayal. That's all it would take for the Queen Mother's final words to become public truth. And as the vault's final secret surfaced, one man made the boldest decision of all to take the Queen Mother's wishes and make them law. He had fought it, dismissed it, buried it. But now, standing alone beneath the weight of his mother's voice and the collapse of royal unity, King Charles made the choice no one expected. He surrendered. And with one trembling signature, he handed Catherine a destiny too powerful to deny. The halls that once echoed with authority now held only the sound of footsteps turning away from him. The isolation wasn't immediate, it crept in slowly, as one by one, those closest to the firm began to drift toward Catherine. Anne had made her decision. Sophie stood firm. Edward refused to back down. Even William, though quiet, had made his allegiance known with his presence in the vault room, listening to the Queen Mother's voice confirm what so many already felt. Catherine wasn't just ready, she had already arrived. Charles, cornered, not by rebellion but by truth, found himself more monarch in name than in purpose. The institution he swore to protect had begun evolving without him. His final meeting with the Palace Legal Council lasted less than 15 minutes. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't ceremonial. It was cold, precise, and irreversible. Documents were presented, protocols reviewed, signatures placed where they had never been meant to go. Charles didn't ask questions, he didn't stall, he signed. And with that pen stroke, a generational shift was sealed. Catherine's authority no longer implied, but recognized. In private, the weight of the moment broke through. Edward entered his chambers later that night, not with judgment but with quiet respect. Charles didn't offer excuses. He simply said, "She planned this long before I saw it." A rare admission not of guilt but of clarity. The next morning, a short internal statement was issued to the family. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a plea. It was a surrender wrapped in solemnity. This is her crown now. I just wear it. And with that, the room fell silent. There were no objections, no celebrations, only acceptance. It was done. The Queen Mother's final will, voiced and written, had not just pierced the walls of Buckingham, it had redrawn the royal order. Camilla, stripped of leverage, made no public response. She didn't storm out or resist. She simply left quietly, discreetly, with only a handful of loyal aides. Her destination remains unknown, her future uncertain. What had once been her palace had now become her exile. The woman who once stood beside the king now stood on the outside of a family that had made its choice, and then came Catherine. That week she appeared at a small engagement unannounced, understated but unmistakable. Fastened to her coat was the Queen Mother's brooch, the same piece Anne had once presented in private, now worn with unflinching grace. It wasn't a statement, it was an answer. A symbol that what was once hidden had now been accepted, that the legacy left in shadows had stepped fully into the light. Catherine didn't need a proclamation. The crown wasn't placed on her head, but the weight of it was felt by everyone in the room. The vault may be closed, but the legacy it unleashed has only just begun. And now all eyes turn to Catherine, no longer just a duchess, but the Queen Mother's chosen heir to a future no one can stop. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.